So aritimelle dikgang tsa kereke Katoliki ka Radio Vatican.
Laudetur Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Thursday, July 7th, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson resigns as head of the Conservative Party. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Ethiopia condemns mass killings in the western part of the country, and the Vatican's Cardinal Secretary of State continues his visit to South Sudan in Pope Francis's name. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned as Conservative Party leader, but says he will stay on as a caretaker premier until a new leader is elected in the coming months. Johnson announced his decision to step down after more than 50 government ministers and aides quit, saying he was no longer fit to govern. From London, Susie Hodges reports.
After less than 3 years in office, Boris Johnson's tumultuous time as Prime Minister is finally coming to an end, following a mass mutiny by his ministers and aides. When the first ministerial resignations were announced on Tuesday, Johnson dug in and initially refused to step down, but in the end he was deserted by all but a handful of allies. On Thursday he bowed to the inevitable and in an address outside his residence confirmed his decision to resign, saying the will of the party was clear. Although Johnson said he would stay on as a caretaker Prime Minister until his successor is chosen by the Conservative Party, a growing number of lawmakers are saying he should step down now. Johnson's resignation comes in the wake of a series of scandals involving his government. The latest crisis erupted after the lawmaker Chris Pincher, who held a government role involved in pastoral care, was forced to quit over accusations of sexual misconduct. Johnson had to apologise after it emerged that he was briefed that Pincher had been the subject of previous sexual misconduct complaints before he appointed him. The Prime Minister claimed he had forgotten. Earlier, Johnson's government had been embroiled in a long-running scandal dubbed Partygate, after a damning report into a series of parties at his Downing Street residence and office that broke strict COVID lockdown rules at the time. Johnson came to power in July 2019, promising to deliver Britain's departure from the European Union following the Brexit referendum. He won a landslide victory in the December election that year, but the latest opinion poll showed he was no longer popular with the public at large. Published on Tuesday, the poll found that 69% of Britons believed Johnson should go, including a majority of Conservative voters. From London, this is Susie Hodges reporting for Vatican Radio.
In Sri Lanka, Cardinal Malcolm Ranjith of Colombo has called for the immediate formation of an interim government to deal with the dramatic economic and financial crisis that has hit the Asian nation, severely impacting the lives and livelihoods of many Sri Lankans. The outspoken prelate said the government led by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has lost all credibility. Lisa Zingarini reports.
As Sri Lanka reels from its worst economic and financial crisis in decades amidst accusations of widespread corruption and financial mismanagement, Cardinal Malcolm Ranjith of Colombo has once again reiterated his call for the immediate resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and for the establishment of an interim government. At a press conference held on Tuesday, Cardinal Ranjith said that the credibility of the Rajapaksa family has dropped to such a level that all attempts to achieve financial, political or constitutional changes have been rejected by public opinion. The outspoken cardinal therefore asked for the immediate formation of an interim government to tackle the most urgent problems of the country and lead into general elections as soon as possible. Rajapaksa overwhelmingly won the last presidential elections in 2019, vowing to restore discipline and strengthen security. However, his popularity took a serious hit over the gross mismanagement of the economy amid allegations of corruption, including questionable deals with Chinese state companies and officials. The economic and financial difficulties began in 2019, with growing public debt aggravated by the collapse of tourism due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The rise in food and energy prices, exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, has dramatically worsened the crisis, and the Sri Lankan government is unable to pay for essential imports, including medicine, food and fuel. In his latest move to thwart the crisis, Rajapaksa announced on Wednesday that he is negotiating with Russia to import more discounted Russian crude oil, despite international sanctions on Moscow's exports following its invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. I am Lisa Zengarini.
Meanwhile, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Ethiopia, CBCE, has condemned mass killings in the western part of the country that left more than 300 people dead. Christopher Wells reports.
Ethiopia's Catholic bishops have decried the killing of more than 300 ethnic Amarans in an attack in the Oromia region in the western part of the country last month. In a statement, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Ethiopia says the Church strongly condemns the killing of innocent people in Gambela and western Walega, mostly women and children. The bishops note that in recent years, in various parts of the country, actions contrary to any religious teaching have been repeated, leading to death, displacement, and migration. They reiterated their deep concern about the dangerous situation in which the population finds itself in their country and in their families. Nobody should be killed because of identity and religion, the bishops say, adding there is no acceptable reason that can lead to the death and humiliation of a human being. Ethiopian government leaders have blamed last month's attacks on the Oromo Liberation Army, the OLA, a banned splinter group of an opposition party. However, the OLA has rejected the accusation, pointing instead to militias connected to the ruling party. They claim federal troops in the area did nothing to stop the slaughter. Last year, the OLA made an alliance with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which has been leading an insurgency against the central government since 2020. Meanwhile, the advocacy group Human Rights Watch notes that well before the conflict in northern Ethiopia, there's been widespread impunity for ongoing rights abuses in Ethiopia's Oromia region, including in areas already suffering from conflict. I'm Christopher Wells.
The Vatican's Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, is continuing his visit to South Sudan in Pope Francis's name, celebrating Mass in the capital Juba on Thursday. With the African nation's top political leaders in attendance, the Cardinal called for forgiveness and love to overcome the tendency towards violence and oppression. He also celebrated Mass on Thursday in a camp for internally displaced people in the northern town of Bentiu. At that event, Cardinal Parolin reminded people living in misery and with poor access to education and food that they are always loved by God, who always hears our cries for help. The Bishop of Malakal, whose territory includes the Bentiu camp, spoke to Vatican Radio's Francesca Sabatinelli after the Mass. Bishop Stephen Majwak said the visit shows the care of the Pope and the Universal Church for vulnerable people.
It was really a wonderful day, a historical day for us in the Diocese of Malakal. It will really be unforgettable day for the people in Unity State and in Bentiu and also those in the camp. The presence of His Eminence in the Diocese of Malakal in particular with the people who has been affected by a lot of atrocities, by war, by natural disaster. It has a very big significance in their life. It is the closeness and the nearness of the Holy Father with the people of God. They will never forget it. This which means also that the Mother Church, the Catholic Church, is near to these people, although they pray, but today that they knew already that the Church is with them. His Eminence has come to also show the solidarity of the Holy Father, the solidarity of the Universal Church with their suffering and their daily life.
May we just explain which is the real situation in this camp? How do they live? Who are they?
These are the people of Unity State who were evicted from their places with the crisis of 2013. And last year, after the signing of the peace agreement, many of them went back to their villages. But unfortunately, the natural disaster came and they were forced back again to live in the camp. These are the people who wanted to make their life, who wanted to bring up their children, who wanted to take care of their children, who wanted to live a dignified life. But then natural disaster and also human-made disaster make their life vulnerable. And now humanitarian situation also is becoming worse for them. And many children do not go to school, and the number of children are many. And many of these children, they don't have schooling, which means also the future might not also be a bright future for many of these children. So it is really something also a concern. It is good that the Mother Church, in the person of His Eminent Cardinal, has come and visit and also to see the reality of the Church. You may go and also advocate for us and advocate for these vulnerable people.
That was South Sudanese Bishop Stephen Majwak of Malakal speaking there to Francesca Sabatinelli. We now look ahead to Friday, an anniversary. On the 8th of July, 9 years ago, a few months after the beginning of his Petrine ministry, the Holy Father made his first apostolic journey when he travelled to Lampedusa. The trip was also a message because in those few hours spent on the island symbolizing the drama of migrants in the Mediterranean, Pope Francis testified with gestures and signs what he meant by the church which goes forth. And finally, the head of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, Cardinal Michael Czerny, released a message on Thursday to mark Sea Sunday, which is observed on the 10th of July. In it, he highlighted the issues of shore leave and the impact it has on seafarers' lives. Lydia O'Kane reports.
Cardinal Michael Czerny, the prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, released a message on Thursday to mark Sea Sunday, which is observed on the 10th of July. On the second Sunday in July each year, Christian communities celebrate this important day, calling to mind the essential work of more than 1 million seafarers who work on ships transporting goods around the world every day of the year. In his message, Cardinal Czerny highlighted that seafarers are seen as invisible, but they are there, not only keeping the world economy moving, but also directly impacting upon the daily life of every one of us. The Cardinal underlined that they have endured many challenges. He also noted over recent years, the maritime world has been hit by a series of crises. Increased demand for goods has led to more ships being held at anchorage for longer periods of time. The war in Ukraine means that ships now face the impossible task of navigating through the mines in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Many vessels have been sunk and human lives have been lost during this unjust and immoral war, he said. Cardinal Czerny pointed out that the global pandemic has meant that over 400,000 seafarers have been stuck on board, unable to leave their ship at the end of their contracts and return home to their families. He also alluded to some shipping companies that appear to be the only ones who have profited financially from the series of crises which have disrupted the global supply chain. Speaking about the issue of shore leave, Cardinal Czerny noted that the ability to leave the vessel and go ashore, if only for a short time, is crucial for seafarers' well-being. He also underlined that despite seafarers being fully vaccinated and countries lifting restrictions, they are frequently denied the free movement we enjoy. The Cardinal stressed that the pandemic must no longer be used as an excuse for banning the crew from going ashore. As long as they take the necessary precautions, seafarers have the right to put their feet on dry ground and meet people other than their colleagues on board. Added to this, Cardinal Czerny highlighted the discrimination some seafarers face, saying, to add insult to injury, some seafarers are allowed to go ashore if they are the correct nationality. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, we invite you to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. And don't forget to catch the latest updates on our Facebook page and Twitter feed. Many thanks go to Daniele Giorgi in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo.
The church is in Africa at the service of reconciliation, peace and justice. The church is in Africa at the service of reconciliation, peace and justice.
This is the Africa service of Vatican Radio.
Welcome to our half-hour daily program for Africa.
In today's program, you can hear our feature, Culture and Society and News for Young People. First, however, our bulletin of church news, followed by African News Panorama. I am Festus Tarawali. Pope Francis, in the third part of his interview with the Reuters news agency, shares his plans to expand the role of women in the Roman Curia and announces his intention to appoint 2 women to the dicastery that assists popes in the selection of bishops. Christopher Wells reports.
Pope Francis has announced his intention to appoint 2 women to the dicastery of bishops, who will therefore be involved in the process of choosing new bishops. The Pope made the remarks in his interview with Reuters senior correspondent Philip Pulela in response to questions about the presence of women in the Vatican, the new apostolic constitution Predicate Evangelium, which reforms the Curia, and about which dicasteries, or Vatican offices, could be entrusted to laymen or laywomen in the future. I am open should an opportunity arise, the Pope said. Right now, the governorate has a deputy governor, and now 2 women will be going to the Congregation of Bishops on the commission to elect bishops, he said. And he continued, in this way, things open up a little bit. Pope Francis then added that in the future, he does see the possibility of lay people being appointed to lead certain Vatican departments, such as the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life, or the Dicastery for Culture and Education, or the Vatican Apostolic Library. The Holy Father recalled that last year he appointed Sister Raffaella Petrini to the number 2 position in the Vatican City Governorate, making her the first woman to hold that position. Pope Francis had also appointed Sister Natalie Beckhart, a French member of the Xavier Missionary Sisters, as Undersecretary of the Synod of Bishops, while several other women already hold high-level positions in the Vatican, including Barbara Jatta, the first female director of the Vatican Museums, and Christiane Murray, the Deputy Director of the Vatican Press Office. Both were appointed by the current Pope. Last month, Cardinal Kevin Farrell, the Prefect of the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life, joked that with the promulgation of the new constitution on the Curia, he could be the last cleric to lead that dicastery. I'm Christopher Wells.
The prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, Cardinal Michael Czerny, has released a message ahead of Sea Sunday, which is observed on the 10th of July. In the message, the Cardinal highlights the issue of shore leave and the impact it has on the lives of seafarers. Shore leave is the time when a sailor is not working on a ship and can spend time on land. Lydia O'Kane reports.
Cardinal Michael Czerny, the prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, released a message on Thursday to mark Sea Sunday, which is observed on the 10th of July. On the second Sunday in July each year, Christian communities celebrate this important day, calling to mind the essential work of more than 1 million seafarers who work on ships transporting goods around the world every day of the year. In his message, Cardinal Czerny highlighted that seafarers are seen as invisible, but they are there, not only keeping the world economy moving, but but also directly impacting upon the daily life of every one of us. The Cardinal underlined that they have endured many challenges. He also noted over recent years, the maritime world has been hit by a series of crises. Increased demand for goods has led to more ships being held at anchorage for longer periods of time. The war in Ukraine means that ships now face the impossible task of navigating through the mines in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Many vessels have been sunk and human lives have been lost during this unjust and immoral war, he said. Cardinal Czerny pointed out that the global pandemic has meant that over 400,000 seafarers have been stuck on board, unable to leave their ship at the end of their contracts and return home to their families. He also alluded to some shipping companies that appear to be the only ones who have profited financially from the series of crises which have disrupted the global supply chain. Speaking about the issue of shore leave, Cardinal Czerny noted that the ability to leave the vessel and go ashore, if only for a short time, is crucial for seafarers' well-being. He also underlined that despite seafarers being fully vaccinated and countries lifting restrictions, they are frequently denied the free movement we enjoy. The Cardinal stressed that the pandemic must no longer be used as an excuse for banning the crew from going ashore. As long as they take the necessary precautions, seafarers have the right to put their feet on dry ground and meet people other than their colleagues on board. Added to this, Cardinal Czerny highlighted the discrimination some seafarers face, saying, to add insult to injury, some seafarers are allowed to go ashore if they are the correct nationality. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
God never forgets the injustices you suffer. This was said by Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin during a visit to a camp for internally displaced persons in Bentiu in North and South Sudan. The Cardinal on Wednesday celebrated Mass at the IDP camp, where about 140,000 people, more than half of them children, are given shelter. Cardinal Parolin, in his homily delivered in English, said, "We find ourselves in this difficult land and yet always loved by God." He then spoke of hope, which he said is not a disembodied hope, separated from suffering and ignorant of human tragedy, or one that does not consider the very difficult reality of the people of Bentiu. On the contrary, continued the Cardinal, our history makes us cry out to the Lord, makes us lay before his altar the injustices, the abuses, the persecutions that too many of us still suffer, but we know that this cry is heard by God and redeemed, a cry that he himself will transform into a song of joy if we know how to ask for forgiveness for our persecutors and pray for those who hurt us, said Cardinal Parolin. Bentiu is under the Diocese of Malakal. Its Bishop Stephen Nyondo Andor Majwok spoke to my colleague Francesca Sabatinelli, who is on the ground in South Sudan. The bishop said the people in the IDP camp wanted to live a dignified life and raise their children, but through disasters, the war and the rains have made their lives vulnerable.
It was really a wonderful day, a historical day for us in the Diocese of Malakal. It will really be an unforgettable day for the people in Unity State and in Bentiu and also those in the camp. The presence of His Eminence in the Diocese of Malakal, in particular with the people who has been affected by a lot of atrocities, by war, by natural disaster, it has a very big significance in their life. It is the closeness and the nearness of the Holy Father with the people of God. They will never forget it. This which means also that the Mother Church, the Catholic Church, is near to these people, although they pray, but today that they knew already that the Church is with them. His Eminence has come to also show the solidarity of the Holy Father, the solidarity of the Universal Church with their suffering and their daily life.
May we just explain which is the real situation in this camp? How do they live? Who are they?
These are the people of Unity State who were evicted from their places with the crisis of 2013. And last year, after the signing of the peace agreement, many of them went back to their villages. But unfortunately, the natural disaster came and they were forced back again to live in the camp. These are the people who wanted to make their life, who wanted to bring up their children, who wanted to take care of their children, who wanted to live a dignified life. But then natural disaster and also human-made disaster make their life vulnerable. And now humanitarian situation also is becoming worse for them. Many children do not go to school, and the number of children are many. And many of these children, they don't have schooling, which means also the future might not also be a bright future for many of these children. So it is really something also a concern. It is good that the Mother Church, in the person of His Eminent Cardinal, has come and visit and also to see the reality of the church. He may go and also advocate for us and advocate for these vulnerable people.
That was Bishop Stephen Nyondo Ado Majwok of Malakal Diocese in South Sudan, speaking there to Francesca Sabatinelli. You're tuned to the Africa service of Vatican Radio.
Depending more than ever on media to give them accurate and timely information. Can public support, which is high right now, particularly surging traffic on digital media, be enough to stave off other factors that might lead to an extinction-level threat?
There's been a consistent trend, actually, throughout the pandemic that people have flocked in huge numbers to media that the public regard as trustworthier. Maria Ressa, the founder of Rappler in the Philippines, has called this flight to quality. But unfortunately, those increases in audiences are not necessarily translating into increased revenues or a viable business model. So the same media organizations who the public is relying on to keep them informed is often at the same time laying off journalists. And this is the challenge. So in many markets, even when the digital traffic is very high, it's not translating into significant revenues in low-income markets. An example of this is Al Mirabad in southern Iraq, which is a radio station but also has a digital platform. They have massive listenership figures and their YouTube traffic is in the millions. But the revenue they're receiving from digital advertising revenue is not commensurate. And actually, it does need external support to survive and deliver their services.
Against this, what needs to happen? Is the answer merely boosting advertising revenue? Or are there actions that governments, the public, and the private sector must take?
There's a clear market failure. Journalism is struggling to fund itself, and people are expecting content for free now. And that's kind of hard to recover from, but it's not impossible. But what we do know is it will take us time to figure out new models that work. Now, what do we do when there's a market failure for other public goods? Well, usually the state finds a way of supporting these goods. But in media, that's really complicated because if states fund journalism, it kind of gets messy and there's just too much scope for editorial interference. So the idea with the International Fund for Public Interest Media is that we will sustain media during the time that it needs it the most to avoid this media extinction event. Our mission is to help these organizations during a period where their business model needs to evolve by doing effectively three things. The first is to provide support that will be financial and non-financial to help them sustain. But it's really important to note here that these are not operational subsidies that will reinforce a dependency culture, but actually what we want to do is help them catalyze new solutions for sustainability. These grants may provide match funding or technical support to help them create a new sustainable model of operation that will enable them to last in the digital world. But thirdly, we also want to create new approaches to supporting media in countries at the macro level as well, to create an environment that can optimize success and make the market of support work more efficiently. We are seeing really new promising models of journalism, whether that's membership models that are using more direct relationships with audiences. And these models could emerge as innovative and sustainable, but those models don't emerge overnight. And we're going to need to support the sector while we figure out how to evolve. And the cost of not doing that is just unimaginable.
Are some media outlets better positioned than others to weather the storm? Is there a regional dimension to this crisis?
The worst effects of the media crisis are in countries with either A, already weak advertising markets, B, where the economic as well as the political impacts of the COVID pandemic have hit media revenue the hardest, or C, where the media are especially vulnerable to political co-option or capture. Some governments have used the restrictions justified by the pandemic to actually further curtail media. In this sense, there's not necessarily a region specific. Some media markets are more vulnerable or resilient than others within specific regions. But our fund will focus on low and middle income countries, but it will be organized in a highly decentralized way with the most funding decisions decided at the regional level. It's really important that decision making is as close as possible to the countries that we support, because we want to tailor our support strategies to the specific country context within which we're working in. We really want to have a strong understanding of the media markets within which we operate, and also, really importantly, the political economy of the countries and the potential for a long-term approach that might chart an exit strategy from the current media market failure.
Can you tell us more about the International Fund for Public Interest Media and how it aims to help?
This idea has been in the making for almost 2 years now, and it's been guided by an advisory group of international journalists and media experts. Our idea, which is massively ambitious, but it needs to be, is to create a large-scale $1 billion response to this media market failure, this media extinction, focused especially on low and middle-income countries. It's a big idea, but trying to tackle this problem requires a big idea. We've undertaken extensive consultation with a wide range of stakeholders to this fund, and based on that evidence, we've designed this fund really with a number of principles in mind. The first is that it's an independent multilateral fund, which will allow media to be supported without the undue political interference from either donors or governments. We'll be supporting genuinely independent media. Historically, it's been hard to fund media due to this politicization, and we think an independent fund of this type, an independent multilateral fund of this type, would really help address this issue. The second principle is around the long-term sustainability of media organizations. We want to create a hub for experimenting with business models that could emerge as the future of journalism. We also want to support the enabling environment that supports and can nurture these media outlets. Our aim is that this fund sustains media over a 10 to 15-year period so that it can evolve and develop its own sustainable strategies. Third principle is that we want a decentralized model where we're working really closely with local organizations that understand the political economy and the country context within which we're working in. This fund cannot be removed from the realities that are faced on the ground. And finally, we're seeking new funding from those who have not historically supported media in the past. So we don't want to divert funding from the already great existing media support organizations that exist, but what we want to do is create a step change in the amount of funding that it's providing. Where is this money going to come from? Well, we're hoping that we can push the amount of overseas development assistance that goes to support media from the very low 0.3% that exists at the moment to ideally an average of 1%. But we're also seeking a diversity of funders. So not just international development agencies, but we're looking to technology companies and also philanthropic entities to support this, those who have an interest in supporting democracy and development. And our initial aim is to raise 100 million to prove the concept and build the foundations of an ambitious institution.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
We think now more than ever, we're seeing a moment where there is a need and a desire to support global media. I think it's the combination of, the fundamental need to support democracy and hold institutions to account, but that combined with this massive increase that we've seen globally in mis and disinformation, which has been proliferated by social media. Ensuring funding at the scale and pace required will be crucial to securing the long-term future of independent media organizations, especially in low and middle-income countries. Through these efforts, the international community can chart a path towards a new era of sustainable public interest journalism while helping to restore trust across society.
Founding Executive Director of International Fund for Public Interest Media, Shital Vias, speaking there with Vibu Mishra from the United Nations News about the fund's bold $1 billion rescue plan to help save journalism for the public good. And that is all we have time for today. Until next week at the same time, my name is Kanyanta Godfrey Kampamba.
And now, news for young people.
Hello and welcome to the program. I am Festus Tarawali. 22 migrants from Mali, including 3 children, died this week off the coast of Libya, Mali's government said on Tuesday. The 22 were part of a group of 83 migrants stuck on a distressed vessel for almost 2 weeks. Of that number, 61 were rescued, including some Malian nationals, with the help of the International Organization for Migration, IOM. A spokesman for the UN agency said there have been significant increases in migrant flows through Niger and Mali towards North Africa in the first quarter of 2022 compared with previous years. Analysts cite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic fallout of the war in Ukraine as driving factors. In an interview with Vatican Radio, Jesuit Father Patrick Etameso, West Africa coordinator for the Jesuit Refugee Service, describes why young people choose to leave their homes and risk their lives at sea.
The situation that happened is supremely tragic. But I think what is important to note is the fact that these people who are traveling, these people who are migrating irregularly, as it were, not just normal people, you could say. These are sometimes just teenagers who see no hope at all in their circumstance. It is worth mentioning that the push and pull factor here varies. On the one hand, talking about the Sahel now, you have extremist violence on the one hand. You have poor governance as well, and just a constant change of government. There is climate change as well. So as it were, these are young people who feel there is no hope for them staying back home. So as a result, they would rather engage in this very perilous journey in the hopes of finding a better fortune in Europe. But sad as it is, a lot of them tend to die in the process and never arrive at their destination.
That was Jesuit Father Patrick Etameso, West Africa coordinator for the Jesuit Refugee Service, JRS. You're tuned to the Africa service of Vatican Radio. In our next program at the same time tomorrow, you can hear our feature Development and the Economy and a reflection by Father Enobong Udiadiong. I am Festus Tarawali, and do join us then. Praised be Jesus Christ. Laudetur Jesus Christus.
Ketepile cheso morena mo mahluku ngaka anhlahela kamehla ketepile hore utlantidisa ketepile cheso morena mo mahluku ngaka anhlahela kamehla ketepile hore please give me strength to withstand this pain, to find the blessings and lessons it brings. Stretch out your hand, Lord, I need you. It's a please give me strength to withstand this pain, to find the blessings and lessons in